Case study, the unexpected million. The extra million in population, added in a space of 15 years up to 2017, that is an increase of either a quarter or a fifth depending on which starting point you use, came as a surprise to me, and I suspect to most people who did not have a policy perspective on demography, population or migration. It is astonishing to me that this policy decision, to grow New Zealand at this speed and with almost no adequate preparation, was never debated. That reflects badly on the political class, but also on the relevant public service, and on the universities. I remember no public report or briefing paper from INZ, and the impact of this new million has hardly been mentioned in the debate on rising house prices. Professor Paul Spoonley is almost the only academic I know who speaks publicly on demographic and migration issues, but I never remember him referring to the sheer numbers or the potential impact on infrastructure until recently. His main theme has been how stimulating it is to have so much diversity in New Zealand, and maybe how it may help us overcome workforce deficits and a decline in birth rate.
I listen to these ministers and politicians who turn up to various immigrant community events, and they're really positive. They're talking about the benefits these immigrants contribute to New Zealand, and they thank them for that. They don't always use that same language when they talk to a wider constituency, so I think they're a bit cautious about what the kickback might be in terms of saying publicly, too loudly, that immigration is actually having a very beneficial effect on New Zealand.
This raises the question to me, as to whether INZ has the relevant analytical and research capability to inform debates of this kind. As far as I can see, there was almost a complete vacuum, and the sheer size and speed of the shift was never made obvious to the public, and perhaps not decision makers either. Does INZ have the research capability to get on top of these issues, and, once achieved, could it not produce reports and briefings? If Treasury can provide forecasts on the economy, why not something similar for the population and workforce via migration and other flows? Case study, the unexpected tertiary students. I am familiar with international students at the university. Many courses in the sciences and business would be unviable without them, and the best of them go on to conduct worthwhile postgraduate work. Some continue on to jobs in the workforce that actually are not being capably filled by New Zealanders, and some even stay in the country long term, although a sizable fraction of those go on to Australia. Imagine my surprise when there emerged another strand of so-called tertiary students, who bypassed the university, to the technical institutes and private providers, and who gained dubious qualifications, in my view anyway, and went on to jobs that seemed to serve little useful purpose, and whose main function seemed to be as a path to residency. It is puzzling to me as to what policy goals this particular entry strand is meeting. But more than that, has been the weaknesses shown up in our regulatory systems, weaknesses bordering on corruption. In many other countries money would be changing hands. Because that does not happen in New Zealand, it has not been classified as corruption, but it very close. First, students in their home country, mainly India, were sold opportunities that were misleading, by advisors who were not qualified and who did not have to meet any sanctioned accreditation, or quality standards. Second, a good number had documentation that was later shown to be fraudulent, resulting in deportation. Thirdly, the courses attended were often in private institutions of questionable standing, with courses of dubious value, and assessments that would not stand up to any rigorous examination. Unfortunately, NZQA has utterly failed to enforce standards in the private tertiary sector, and the only reason we know of the dubious practices is by students and whistleblowers going to the media. And this is not just the private providers. I have seen advertisements for Wananga featuring foreign students. Again, a suggestion that all is not well with the integrity of this particular migration stream.
Thank you for the invitation to speak. I just feel that the tone's going to change slightly in terms of what I've got to say. What we're doing is we've been funded through EMB to look at what New Zealand looks like in 2036. So I've spoken to some of you before, Peter here and Reeps conference, but I'll be saying some of the same things, but I just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the things that are happening. Let me start. I'm going to disappear off to do yet another media interview because the Labour Party decided to announce its immigration policy. And I'm pretty disappointed, I've got to say. And I think you, as the sector, should be disappointed, and you should be saying that some of your clients and some of the things you do are being undervalued by the Labour Party. Why they should be focusing on bachelor's degrees as the benchmark, I do not know. So, as you can tell, I'm slightly fired up. Duncan Garner and I had a very interesting conversation on television yesterday morning, and he tried to get me to say that the Labour Party were making it all up on the hoof. I wasn't going that far, but I think there are some issues. And let's come back to those.
Finally, with worthless qualifications, and still set on residency, many of these students have ended up being exploited by utterly shameless employers, usually drawn from their own ethnic community. They have been given salaries that meet the migration requirements on the understanding that they hand back a good portion of it. They have worked extreme hours for little pay, and in almost all cases we only know about such practices because a few brave souls have gone public. The New Zealand regulatory authorities, whether that be the Labour Inspectorate or the licensing authorities, have been almost completely ineffectual. I have gone into this strand of migration entry in some detail because it demonstrates that a program was established, or allowed to emerge, that not only sold a dud bill of goods to the migrants, it also failed to meet any demonstrable workforce need, but, more than that, it fostered a pipeline of corruption and exploitation, for no good reason. If New Zealand gained, for example, technicians to assist the broadband rollout, as it did, or health professionals from overseas, as in the past and likely the future, or CEOs of startups and tech giants as is the case for almost all the large entities in Silicon Valley, we would judge this stream a success. But it has achieved none of these. Instead, it has damaged our institutions with corrupting practices, it has served no obvious useful workforce niche, and it has led a significant group of young people on a wild goose chase for a better life that is simply not there.